build is clean power for all, but I want to talk to you about clean light, because at SolarAid we think that light is the sort of stepping stone that leads to the next step up the energy ladder, and that's certainly the journey that we've learned along the way. So this is a kerosene lamp. Actually, it's not this. That's a hurricane lamp. That's what most people think is a kerosene lamp. They're used in sort of films that Indiana Jones might come in. This is a kerosene lamp, and you can see it there, sort of in the background. I'll pass a couple around so you can see what they're like. And they're made out of tins. So this one is made out of a lavender bouquet air freshener, for example. And you can see the problem. It's clearly dangerous, so horrific burns due to misbuilt lamps are very commonplace in many villages in Africa. And poisoning too, because it's stored in soda bottles. In fact, I didn't notice till last night, there's a soda bottle in the corner there. That's probably what was storing the kerosene. And I spoke to a doctor who worked in South Africa, and he said all too common was when he had to deal with cases of young people who had accidentally taken on a little bit of paraffin or kerosene. And once it gets into the lungs, it can be fatal very quickly. So you've got to move very fast. And it's clearly not good for your health. You can imagine the burning smoke as a result of this wick. And the fine particles it emits are some of the worst to do with indoor air pollution, which in itself kills more people than malaria. And as a Kenyan colleague corrected me, these are used a lot during the day as well, as a lot of households don't have large windows, so they're often used during the day for light as well. But the real killer, the hidden killer, is the cost. So families typically spend 10%, 15% of their household expenditure on kerosene each week. And so you could say it keeps people in poverty. So what a choice. You've got to live in darkness, or you've got to burn your kerosene lamp. And if that's not enough, it's not good for all of us, in fact. So a kerosene lamp emits a ton of CO2 or CO2 equivalents, like black carbon, over a three-year usage, so about a kilogram a day, we reckon. And these are two quotes I've taken from authors of a study on emissions of kerosene in 2012. So Nicholas Lamb says that getting rid of kerosene lamps may seem like a small, inconsequential step to take, but when considering the collective impact of hundreds of millions of households, it's a simple move that affects the planet. And a co-author says there are no magic bullets that will solve all of our greenhouse problems, but replacing kerosene lamps is a low-hanging fruit. And we don't have many examples of that in the climate world. And Kirk Smith was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize for his work on climate change. And yet the solution exists, the simple solar light. And it's an extraordinary piece of appropriate technology. And there are three components that have come together. Of course, the solar panel, which is sort of pioneered in space, the LEDs, which are just fantastic now, and the battery. And it's probably the battery that's probably the weakest part of a solar light in terms of its lifespan. But it's the falling prices of these key components that have led to a product like this. And this would probably cost about $5 or so to produce and would sell for about twice that in parts of Africa. We know that one of these, we now know from our research, displaces one of these. That's what we found. And that means a sort of safer, cleaner home for people, cleaner air to breathe. And savings. People use the savings for better food, for educational costs or inputs towards their small farm or business. But what's really fascinating is how we learn how clean light is used. So we know that children study at least an hour extra more as a result of a solar light. We know of teachers who can earn a little bit of extra income by doing tuition, tailors who can work into the night in order to earn a bit more business, and so on. And traders who can light their wares in the evening after the sun has gone down. And over the last few years, we've gathered as much data as we possibly can. We've made that a key purpose of of what we've done in Africa to understand what happens when people own a solar light. And this is from an award-winning impact team that we've developed. So we can now say that a 3-year usage of a solar light can save a family around $200 from no longer buying kerosene. Will avert a ton of CO2 from displacing a kerosene lamp and leads to 1,000 hours of study. And this varies from data that we've collected across Kenya, Tanzania, Senegal, Zambia, and Malawi. And it varies from country to country. So it's interesting. In Malawi, children study twice as much when given access to a solar light. They'll study on average for 2 hours extra. We've put all of this online too. So if you go to our website, to our impact section, you can go to an area called our dashboard, and it's using a piece of software called Tableau. So you can tap in different things to see the differences, how people use, what's their main lighting source before buying a kerosene lamp, what they think it's a reasonable price and so on. So all this data we're trying to put online so other people can access it. So you can appreciate a solar light has a huge impact on the lives of people. So the problem to solve is not, what should replace this? The solution already exists. The problem is, how do we get this into the hands of people as fast as possible? Who would benefit the most? And at SolarAid, even though we're a charity, we believe the best way to do this is to sell them at a fair market price and not give them away. Now that might seem a bit unreasonable coming from a charity, but we've learned that it's far more sustainable. To begin with, you treat people as customers rather than beneficiaries of aid, and that puts the power in their hands. They have a right to a warranty should the product fail or need repair. It encourages local traders to act as points of distribution and repair. And it helps create entrepreneurs like this person here. So it spreads quicker and it's more sustainable. And if we gave them away, we learned that communities would just wait their turn until their round of solar lights would come their way. And there's no incentive to build that local infrastructure that we'll need in the future. And perhaps most importantly, people wouldn't take that first step, the first step on the energy ladder that's going to get them hungry for more power, for things that might charge a radio or perhaps a TV, which in turn will give them access to huge amounts of information. It's probably important to point out we don't subsidise the lights, we sell them at a fair market price. We're not trying to undermine the market, we're trying to stimulate it. And that's a really important aspect of what we've tried to set out from the beginning. So I thought I'd introduce you to some of the lights. The one on the left here is actually one we developed. It's a solar light that we put inside a hurricane lamp. We thought it was a brilliant idea because people are familiar with this, they could hang it up. It was the first solar light SolarAid ever devised. It was a disaster because this is the symbol of poverty. People didn't want that, they wanted a bright light. And so we learned a very important lesson, and something we stuck to pretty much ever since was, let's get to know the customer. So at that point, SolarAid stopped developing solar lights and it focused on who else is doing great solar lights, and let's get to know the customer to find out why they're not purchasing them. So the next one I want to show you is this lovely light. It's the D-Light S2, and it's just a simple study light. It's got an inbuilt panel. It would cost about $10 or sell for about $10 in Africa, and it has about lumens of about 25. So a candle would give you about half of that. It's one of the best-selling lights in Africa, and we've certainly found it a very popular entry-level light. And then this is my favourite, and it's a lot of people's favourites. It's the Sun King Pro by Greenlight Planet, a different manufacturer. It comes with a separate panel. But this light will last 45 hours on its lowest setting and provides 100 lumens of light. But perhaps most importantly, it charges a mobile phone, or a radio for that matter, that can charge from a USB. So really, really popular for teachers. And this is really the sort of light that people need. But sometimes to get them to see that, they buy an entry-level light, and then they'll move up to it. and they're really robust. If I was from one of the teams from Kenya, I promise you they would take it and they would just drop it on the floor to show how solid they are. I don't like doing that, so I won't do that. So there are three questions that always seem to come up. So I'm going to anticipate that they're going to come up and I'll answer them now. And the first is, where are these made? Well, pretty much all great solar lights and all the bad solar lights are made in China. And they just took a lead in that manufacturing technology. The second is, well, what's the carbon footprint of these solar lights? So I think there's a lot more work to be done on that, but crudely, it's about 1 kilogram for every dollar of the landed price. So we estimate this would be about sort of 7 kilograms of carbon or so, and the sunken would be a bit more than that, would be about 30, I guess. But to put it another way, a solar light will recoup its cost pretty quickly, once it's displacing a kerosene lamp from being used. The third question I'm asked a lot about is about the recycling of solar lights. And that's going to become more and more of an issue as these start to spread more widely. And one of the interesting projects we're doing is with Total, the garages, because actually they're one of the biggest distributors of solar lights in Africa. But they now run a scheme where people can return a faulty light and they get a voucher on the next light that they purchase. And it's those sort of initiatives that we want to see more of. But currently, we know that manufacturers make it really difficult to replace the batteries, the component that will go first. And they've done that so they're not tampered with, but also to make them waterproof. But increasingly, we're keen that there's more thinking. And there's an organisation called the Global Off-Grid Lighting Association, and they've set up a working group really to focus on that issue going forward. So these lights have existed, and they have done for many years. When I started at SolarAid 5 years ago, both these lights existed as products, but yet people weren't buying them. And yet they're spending probably $1.50 on kerosene each week. They're probably spending $0.50 or so on charging their mobile phone. And so buying even a study light, they could start to recoup some cost in a matter of weeks. So we focused on that problem. Why is that? What could we do to spread the more? And there were three barriers that we picked on: accessibility, trust, and affordability. So just have a think to yourselves for a moment, which of those you think is the biggest obstacle of them all? And whilst you do that, I'll just touch a little bit more on. So accessibility, well, lights clearly aren't available in remote rural areas because businesses just don't have the incentive for the cost to take them there, because they're not confident of making a profit. Well, affordability, well, people just don't have the cash or capital to buy lights, even a $10 light. It might be a big step for someone. And there's no credit. People don't have bank accounts in which they could simply buy a product. And then finally, trust. So people aren't familiar with these products. So, it's something I'm buying something which I think is good, but, do I really believe in it? So can you think which is the biggest obstacle in your own mind? Maybe I can answer. Well, the answer is trust, believe it or not, trust. That's what we found. It's key to unlocking the other two. You'd think it's affordability or the fact the lights aren't there. But if you get this right, people will find the money, and you'll be sure businesses will find a way of getting them to people who want to create demand. So in hindsight, we know that's the answer as well from the way we cracked it. But it's an interesting one up front. You wouldn't think that was so obvious. So we started a project that we began with. We called it Sunny Money. We didn't want to be called SolarAid in Africa because we're going to sell these solar lights. So we used the name Sunny Money. The great thing about Sunny Money is when you say it, I find people like to smile as well. So it's a really good sort of starting point. And we began to sell our lights back in 2008. And before I joined, but I was told by the John Key, who led our program, on the first day we sold 0 solar lights. And on the second day we sold 1 solar light. And apparently on the third day we sold 2 solar lights. So you can see the way it's going. But it just wasn't easy. And gradually it started to grow. Maybe more importantly, we got to get to know the customer better, what were the blockages behind it. And in 2010, when these lights became online, they still weren't selling, but that's when we had a breakthrough. Before I tell you about the breakthrough, I'm going to tell you about our secret weapon. And it probably had more influence than our progress than anything else, and it's called a BHAG. Have any of you come across a BHAG before? Well, you probably have, you don't realise it. It's a big, hairy, audacious goal. So the best example of the BHAG is when Kennedy said we're going to land a man on the moon by the end of the decade. Although I think he said here, this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out, landing a man on the moon and returning safely to Earth. That's exactly what he said. It's an extremely powerful concept. And it's been probably one of the key reasons behind our determination to see things through and to embrace failure as part of that as well. You know you have a BHAG if you have a clear finishing line. It's just the other side of impossible, so that it's scary and a bit inspiring too. So a true BHAG is clear and compelling, serves as a unifying focal point of effort, and acts as a clear catalyst for team spirit. Check it out. There's lots of management stuff on BHAGs, but I think they're extremely powerful. So we set our BHAG, 50 years on from Kennedy, to eradicate the kerosene lamp from Africa by the end of the decade. And when we set that BHAG, we really had no idea how we were going to go about it, because at the time we were just distributing a few hundred of these solar lights each month. But what it did, it really focused our attention, all of it, and we actually dropped areas of our programme that didn't contribute to that goal. So at the time we were installing large solar panels on clinics and schools with large aid grants, but they didn't really contribute to the goal of eradicating these. So we dropped it, even though funders were saying, we'll give you another grant if you carry on that work. And we had to turn down that money. It's very hard for a fundraiser, believe me, to turn down funding. But we wanted to be true to the goal. And then when we had that little blip, it really focused all of our attention. And I think if we'd been doing all of the other work, solar cookers, large solar panels, we probably would have missed this rather exciting moment that happened. And the breakthrough came on an island off the coast of Tanzania called Mafia, and it's just below Zanzibar. And what had happened there, the Sunny Money teams had brought together the teachers in the community and had shown them the solar lights. And the teachers had talked to the pupils about the lights, and the pupils had gone back to their parents. And the parents, probably motivated to buy a solar light to help their son or daughter study, bought their first solar light. And I can relate to that, and I'm sure you can too, as something that sort of drives people. You can sort of understand why that took place. So we took the approach to the mainland of Tanzania, and this was in 2011, and I was really fortunate to have been there at the time. And we were up in the sort of Arusha area, going out to schools, showing them the range of solar lights. And I recall we got together to look at the results. They were so disappointing. Completely failed. It just did not work. There was no take-up of solar lights. And this is where I think a BHAG really comes into its own. Because we could have just accepted the results, or we could have done worse. We could have brushed the failure under the carpet. And I'm afraid lots of NGOs do that. They don't like to talk about failure because of reporting back to funders. But SolarAid did something extraordinary. We sort of paraded it and analysed it and thought, well, why didn't that work? And I recall we were all told, go for a walk and come back with thoughts about what we could do. So we got back from sort of thinking, oh, that's just not work. And someone came up with an idea. They said, well, instead of going out to each of the schools, why don't we get all the schools to come to us? This is my notebook at the time, and I've starred it. I don't often star 2 stars, head teachers' meetings. So we were really excited about, this could be so much more effective, much more time effective, getting all the schools together. So that's exactly what we did. Working through the District Education Authority, and we could do that because we were a charity, an NGO, we assembled all the teachers in a particular area. Of course it was so much more time efficient, but who is now the messenger? Going back to the communities, not a stranger from Sunny Money, but one of the most trusted people in the community, the head teacher. And that made all the difference. They told the teachers told the pupils, and the word spread. And the great thing is that schools, even though distribution of products like this can be difficult, schools are highly organised in countries like Tanzania. So it became a distribution model for us as well. And the take-up went exponential. So we took this model to countries like Kenya, and we started selling upwards of 50,000 solar lights a month. And by March of 2014, we hit the monumental milestone of 1 million solar lights. You often, I don't know if you've seen sort of entrepreneurs present their business, they usually present a theoretical hockey stick curve. Well, this is a real hockey stick curve of actually what happened. And you can sort of see, well, here's the breakthrough, and wow, it just sort of took off. Let me give you one example of a change that happened in the lake zone of Tanzania, so that's up on the border of Uganda and Burundi. There's a Dutch organisation, and they did a survey of a baseline survey that showed only 3% of households had solar lights, and this was back in 2012. In 2013, Sunny Money started selling solar lights, and in 2015, when they did their follow-up research, over 50% of households had solar lights, and solar was viewed as the thing to have, the most desirable thing. But there's a price to success that we didn't see. And in the middle of last year, our sales in Tanzania fell dramatically, where it all gone really well. And the reason, the market for solar lights taken off, and we were literally competed out by enterprising entrepreneurs and enterprises emerging into the market. So I taught this lecture by Charles Handy the other day at a Bonn conference, and it's about the S-curve that all businesses go through. And what he was saying is businesses need to think like this. They need to think here about the next bit, not here when it all starts to plateau. Well, here's what happened to our sales in Tanzania. You can see they plateaued. We just didn't anticipate that it would take off so quickly. And no longer people needed to go to a school to buy a solar light. Someone in their village would say, oh, here's a solar light that you can buy from me. At an equally competitive price, so they would buy it from them. So we'd failed to adapt our model, and we've sort of wrapped our heads. And here's my sort of take on it. I'm sure you're aware of the innovation adoption curve. Well, we are now, but I think that's what we've done. We've taken the market in Tanzania past what's often called the chasm, to the tipping point. And we'd actually sold just shy of 1 million solar lights. And if you equate that to the off-grid population, that's about 13.5% of the off-grid population. So that's just us alone. So if you add in other light sales from other organisations, we almost certainly went past this tipping point. And in hindsight, we can see now why the market took off. So we've withdrawn our programme from Tanzania. We've actually closed down our operation there and handed over to a local enterprise. And we're going to do the same in Kenya. We're going to let go of Sunny Money, our enterprise, and let it run as a business in its own right, because the market there, where we sold 500,000 lights, has also taken off. And we've learned a lot. We're now sort of trying to think as a sort of step ahead. We haven't given up, and our solar light sales in places like Zambia continues to do well. And Zambia's suffering a severe drought at the moment, so lots of power outages. But the most interesting place at the moment for us is in Malawi, where we've had another breakthrough. And Malawi is a really difficult place to do business. There's problems with dealing with the currency rate, and they've had floods recently, and of course it's extremely poor. I think it's ranked as one of the poorest, if not the poorest country in the world at present. And we've learned that sales of solar lights are highly seasonal. So we've tried something to sort out that barrier to affordability, which we call pay-as-you-go. Recently there was a BBC radio coverage which called it pay-as-you-glow. And what it does is it puts a bit of tech in here, and it means someone can buy the solar light in instalments. And it's a way of offering credit to someone who doesn't have access to a bank account. And over a period of months, they can pay off the light, and each time they give a payment, it activates the light for another period. So we've trialled this in Malawi, and we've had a really good take-up. Just to touch on one other final game changer that we have. This is a new solar light that SolarAid have developed. It's the second one after the one we failed doing here. But this time we've got all that fantastic data. We've worked in partnership with a solar panel manufacturer who've never gone into this sort of, to develop a solar light which we can land in Africa for a few dollars. So this could be a real game changer. It will cost half the price of current solar lights, and it could really make sure that people who live on the poverty line could buy their first solar light and get them on to that energy ladder. So we're going to be trialling that in Malawi, in Zambia, in Tanzania and Uganda this summer. Who knows, you know, I think we've learned that we've got to embrace things and see how things go. And we're going to do it as a fundraiser as well. So we're going to sell them here for about £10, making it clear that we're helping fund the production and the distribution of the solar light in Africa. I haven't had time to tell you about some of the amazing stories of midwives who've used solar lights to help deliver babies instead of having to hold a mobile phone in their mouth, or a star student in Kenya who came to this class and he put it down on one of these little solar lights as a result of doing so, or how solar lights are used for peacemaking in Kenya, or how we got them out to Sierra Leone to help with the Ebola crisis, and that just transformed the ways teams work. There's so many applications that we think that we're still learning. We've heard that there's a S100 that's going to come out. We've sometimes heard, not directly to us, other people say we have an unfair advantage that we're a charity. Well, actually, we've had plenty of businesses, and this is someone from Off-Grid Electric, a very successful business in Tanzania that do higher solar systems, and he's effectively saying that we prime the market for them, that we help the market, so we encourage it. So we think we still have a role as acting as a stimulus, although I think a lot of people, because they see us as a charity, think, oh, we have access to all this fantastic grant funding, but it doesn't necessarily make it easier. And as a fundraiser, I like to think we've got a bit of smart aid. So later this month, if you listen to Radio 4, tune into the Week's Good Cause on Sunday, May the 21st, and you'll hear Ian McEwan, the author, talk about SolarAid. He wrote a book called Solar, so that's why it's his passion. And we're very transparent about the fact we sell solar lights, but we think it's a sort of way of engaging the public about something that's portrays a better image. And we did an appeal 4 years ago. It was one of the most successful radio appeals they've had, and they're going to give us a second one to feed back on what was achieved. But please do catch it and spread others. He's a fantastic narrator. I have a little excerpt, but just because of time, I don't want to. I'll hold fire on that. So finally, just to touch on our total impact, we've sold just shy of 2 million solar lights. We estimate we've reached about 10 million people. Displaced many kerosene lamps, led to lots of savings over the course of 3 years, and certainly led to lots of additional study time. And we'd like to think that light is the beginning of that journey that takes people on that first step towards the energy ladder.